At my grandfather's will reading, my uncle announced that Grandpa left everything to my male cousins because women marry out anyway. They all laughed victoriously while I sat there in silence. 2 weeks later, I called a family meeting and revealed Grandpa's second and original will. He left me his 80% controlling shares and his entire estate. You all work for me now, and we're auditing every expense account starting today. Their faces went pale. They never saw it coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Rachel Morrison, and until 3 weeks ago, most of my family forgot I existed. I'm the granddaughter who never quite fit the Morrison family mold. No husband, no kids, just a quiet life working as a financial consultant. To them, I was the spinster niece who wasted her expensive education on a boring career. But to my grandfather, James Morrison, I was something else entirely. I was the only one who showed up. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect from a family like mine. Expensive flowers, catered food that nobody touched, and relatives who hadn't spoken to Grandpa in years suddenly sobbing like they'd lost their best friend. I stood by the buffet table, watching my 3 cousins, Derek, Brandon, and Tyler, laughing near the bar like they were at a cocktail party instead of a funeral. My Uncle Richard was holding court in the center of the room, telling stories about building the Morrison legacy, conveniently forgetting that it was my grandfather who built everything, while Richard just showed up to collect a paycheck. I noticed how people offered their condolences to my cousins with warm hugs and long conversations, but when they got to me, it was just a quick, sorry for your loss before moving on. I was used to it. I'd been overlooked my entire life. The Morrison men were the stars, and the women were just decoration, expected to marry well and produce the next generation of Morrison males. I'd committed the ultimate sin by staying single and focusing on my career instead. What they didn't know was that for the past 5 years, while they were busy ignoring Grandpa, I was visiting him every single Sunday. I'd bring fresh flowers, teach him how to use his iPad, and listen to his stories about building Morrison Industries from nothing. And more importantly, I'd been managing his offshore investments, learning everything he knew about business, finance, and what it really meant to build a legacy. My Aunt Patricia whispered to another guest loud enough for me to hear, "Such a shame she never married. James always hoped she'd give him great-grandchildren." I wanted to laugh. Grandpa had stopped hoping for great-grandchildren from any of us years ago, right around the time he realized his grandsons only called when they needed money. The real show started 3 days later at the will reading. We gathered in Attorney Holland's office, some generic corporate lawyer my Uncle Richard had selected. Richard sat at the head of the table like he was already running things, and my cousins sprawled in their chairs with the confidence of men who'd never been told no in their entire lives. Attorney Holland cleared his throat and began reading. To my grandsons Derek, Brandon, and Tyler Morrison, I leave my estate, my shares in Morrison Industries, and all business holdings to be divided equally among them. The room erupted. Derek actually pumped his fist in the air. Brandon let out a whoop. Tyler smirked at me from across the table, and I could see the thought written all over his face. Finally, the natural order was restored. Then Uncle Richard stood up, spreading his arms like some kind of prophet. "The family name must stay strong," he announced. "Women marry out anyway. This is how legacies survive, how families stay powerful." James understood that. The whole room burst into laughter and applause, like he'd just delivered the speech of the century. I sat completely still. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing any emotion on my face whatsoever. I just looked at each of them, one by one, memorizing their expressions, their arrogance, their absolute certainty that they'd won. Then I stood up, smoothed down my black dress, and said 2 words. "Congratulations, everyone." The confusion on their faces was delicious, but I didn't stick around to enjoy it. I walked out of that office with my head high, got in my car, and drove home to my modest apartment. They probably thought I was going home to cry into my pillow, the poor spinster who got cut out of the will. If only they knew. I unlocked my desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder of documents. Legal papers, investment portfolios, and a handwritten letter from Grandpa that started with the words, "Rachel, when you read this, it means they've shown their true colors." I remembered the day he wrote it, 2 years ago in his study. He'd looked so tired but so clear-eyed when he said, "They think I'm too old to notice, but I see everything. They visit once a year and spend the whole time asking about the will. You're the only one who sees me, Rachel. Really sees me." I opened my laptop and logged into the offshore investment accounts I'd been managing. $4 to $5 million, grown from the $10 million Grandpa had given me to prove I could handle it. I'd turned his test into a fortune, and he'd rewarded my loyalty in ways my family couldn't even imagine. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Mr. Chen, it's Rachel Morrison. It's time to convene the family meeting. Yes, both wills need to be present, 2 weeks from today." For the next 2 weeks, I watched my family celebrate their victory from the shadows. Derek started shopping for yachts. Brandon quit his job, announcing he was too important for regular employment now. Tyler was telling anyone who'd listen that he was CEO material. Uncle Richard had already moved into Grandpa's office at Morrison Industries and started making decisions like the company was his personal piggy bank. And I documented everything. Every ridiculous expense, every questionable vendor contract, every luxury resort they billed as a business trip. They were so busy celebrating that they'd forgotten the most important lesson Grandpa ever taught me. Never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. On the 13th day, I visited Grandpa's grave alone. I placed fresh flowers on the headstone, white roses, his favorite, and whispered, "They're about to learn what you already knew." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, and for just a moment, I could swear I heard him laugh. The family meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd chosen Morrison Industries headquarters deliberately, Grandpa's old boardroom where he'd built his empire. I wanted them to remember what was at stake and who had built everything they were so eager to claim. They arrived like they were doing me a favor. Uncle Richard walked in first, loosening his tie with casual arrogance. My cousins followed, Derek checking his phone, Brandon yawning, and Tyler smirking with that same condescending look from the will reading. "Rachel, sweetheart," Uncle Richard said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "If this is about some personal items from the house, we can absolutely discuss that. No need for all this formality." I stayed standing while they settled into their seats. I'd dressed differently today, a tailored navy suit that Grandpa said made me look like someone who meant business. "Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss, and I don't want to waste anyone's time." Derek laughed. "This should be good. What's the matter, Rachel? Need a loan already?" I didn't take the bait. Instead, I pulled out a document and placed it on the table. Grandpa had a second will, the real one, drafted with his private attorney, Mr. Chen, whom he'd worked with for 40 years. The room went silent. Uncle Richard's smile faltered. "That's impossible. We had the will read by a licensed attorney." "Oh, that will was legitimate," I said. "It was also 5 years old. Grandpa created that back when he still had hope you all might actually care about him as a person and not just a bank account." The boardroom door opened. Mr. Chen walked in, the distinguished man in his 70s carrying a briefcase. He'd been Grandpa's attorney since before I was born. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to execute the last will and testament of James Robert Morrison, dated 18 months ago." Brandon shot up from his chair. 18 months? That's insane. Grandpa wasn't in his right mind. He was old, confused. "Actually," Mr. Chen said, pulling out papers, "Mr. Morrison underwent a complete cognitive evaluation 1 week before signing this. He scored in the 98th percentile for his age group, sharp as ever, according to 3 independent doctors." I watched the color drain from Uncle Richard's face. Mr. Chen began reading. "To my granddaughter, Rachel Elizabeth Morrison, who has shown me more love and genuine care than the rest of my family combined, I leave 80% controlling shares of Morrison Industries, my estate, and oversight." of all family trusts. The explosion was immediate. Derek slammed his fist on the table. Brandon started shouting about lawyers. Tyler just stared at me with pure hatred. But Uncle Richard was the worst. He stood slowly, his face twisted with rage and fear. "This is a joke. James would never do this." "Sit down, Richard," I said quietly. "I'm not finished," Mr. Chen continued. "To my grandsons, I leave minority shares with no voting rights. To my son Richard, I leave a generous pension, to be administered at the discretion of Rachel Morrison. Years of service, not years of family, because that's exactly what Grandpa had seen him as by the end. "We'll fight this in court," Derek said, his voice shaking. "We'll tie this up for years." I smiled then, really smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that, Derek, because there's something else you should know." I pulled out my tablet and turned it toward them. "For the past 5 years, Grandpa asked me to manage his offshore investments. He gave me $10 million to invest. I turned it into $45 million. Every decision documented, every transaction above board." The room went dead silent. "But that's not the interesting part," I continued. "The interesting part is what I found while reviewing Morrison Industries' accounts. Grandpa asked me to keep an eye on the company finances. Uncle Richard had gone pale. Rachel, whatever you think you found—" "Derek," I interrupted, $50,000 charged to your expense account. Strip clubs, escorts, luxury hotels, all marked as client entertainment. I called every single client you listed. None of them remember meeting with you." Derek's mouth opened and closed. "Brandon, you created a vendor company under a fake name and billed Morrison Industries for services never rendered. $200,000 over 2 years. Brandon looked like he was going to be sick. And Tyler, you've been skimming from employee bonuses. $320,000 over 3 years. Tyler stared at the table, jaw clenched. "But Uncle Richard, you're the real prize. Unauthorized salary increases totaling $600,000. Office renovations that somehow cost triple the quote. And my favorite, a corporate retreat in the Maldives costing $200,000, right after you claimed we needed to cut employee benefits." Aunt Patricia gasped. "You all work for me now," I said. "My first order of business is comprehensive audits of every expense account, every vendor contract, every transaction from the past 3 years. Forensic accountants will find every penny you stole." "Rachel, we're family," Uncle Richard said desperately. "We can work this out privately." "Family?" I stopped. "Where were you every Sunday when Grandpa sat alone, hoping someone would visit? Where were you on his birthday when I was the only one who showed up? You couldn't spare 10 minutes for the man who built everything you've been trying to steal." Aunt Patricia turned to her husband, furious. "You told me he was fine. You said Rachel was overreacting." The family started fracturing right there. Accusations flying, everyone turning on each other. Derek blamed Brandon. Brandon blamed Tyler. Tyler blamed Uncle Richard. I gathered my papers and headed for the RAL. Door. Meeting dismissed. You'll receive formal notices about the audit within 48 hours. My phone rang in the hallway. Unknown number. Ms. Morrison? This is Jennifer Walsh from the Business Chronicle. We've received information about irregularities at Morrison Industries. Would you care to comment? Someone had leaked the story. The private war I'd planned was about to become very public. No comment at this time. I said and hung up. I looked back through the window at my family, still tearing each other apart. Completely unaware their private humiliation was about to hit every business publication in the country. This was going to get much worse before it got better. The news broke the next morning. Morrison Industries heir exposes family fraud. Was splashed across every business publication in the country. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, board members, employees terrified about their jobs. And lawyers offering their services. The private family drama I'd hoped to contain had exploded into a full-blown public scandal. But the worst part? I discovered Uncle Richard's plan went deeper than simple greed. While digging through his files with the forensic accountants, We found emails, negotiations, legal documents. He'd been planning to sell Morrison Industries to our biggest competitor the moment he secured control. Everything Grandpa built, every employee who depended on us, every legacy my grandfather, quote, had fought for. Richard was ready to destroy it all for a massive payout. This wasn't just about the will anymore. It was about saving the company itself. I faced an impossible choice. I could prosecute them criminally, send my own family to prison. Or I could handle it quietly and let them walk away. The board wanted real action. The employees wanted justice. The media wanted a spectacle. But every time I tried to decide, I heard Grandpa's voice in my head. He'd valued family above everything. Even when they disappointed him, would he want me to destroy them completely? I called Uncle Richard to Grandpa's old office for a private meeting. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his confident swagger completely gone. Your grandfather would never have wanted this, he said, desperation thick in his voice. He believed in family unity, Rachel. He'd be ashamed of what you're doing. Something snapped inside me. He believed in family who actually showed up, Uncle Richard. You taught me an important lesson. Loyalty means nothing without action. You had 40 years to be a real son to him, and you chose money every single time. I slid a document across the desk. Here are my terms. You and the cousins resign from all positions immediately. You return every dollar you stole. You sign NDAs and never speak about Morrison Industries again. In exchange, no criminal charges. You walk away quietly, and you get to keep your freedom. Richard stared at the paper, his hands shaking. You're just like him, you know. James was ruthless in business too. No, I said firmly. Grandpa was ruthless for family. I'm ruthless because of what you did to family. There's a difference. He signed the document without another word. 6 months later, I stood in that same boardroom, looking out at the city. Morrison Industries was stabilized. I've promoted loyal employees, cut the dead weight, and restored our reputation. The company Grandpa built was safe, but the cost was devastating. Most of my family wouldn't speak to me. Holiday gatherings were awkward. Painful reminders of everything I've lost to do what was right. I visited Grandpa's grave on a Sunday, like always. I saved your company, I whispered, placing white roses on his headstone. But I lost your family. I hope I made the right choice. He would be proud, you know. I turned to find Emma, Derek's teenage daughter, standing behind me with her own flowers. My dad won't admit it, she continued, but you did the right thing. Grandpa would be proud. That night, while cleaning out Grandpa's desk at the office, I found a hidden compartment. Inside was a letter with my name on it, dated exactly 1 year after his death. My hands trembled as I opened it. Rachel, if you're reading this, you passed. The others revealed their true nature, and you had the strength to do what was necessary. The hardest part of leadership isn't making tough decisions, it's living with them afterward. Remember, you didn't break this family. You exposed what was already broken. Now build something better. Attached was information about a charitable foundation he'd created in secret. A second fortune dedicated to helping families in crisis. He'd left it all for me to manage, not just a company, but a purpose. 1 year after the funeral, I stood at a Morrison Industries town hall, announcing the James Morrison Family Foundation. In the audience sat employees, community members, and even some family who've slowly started reaching out. Aunt Patricia, who'd divorced Richard, sat in the front row. And in the back, barely visible, was Derek. He caught my eye and nodded. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. That evening I sat in my office, looking at a photo of Grandpa and me from 5 years ago. We were laughing, his arm around my shoulders. I closed the frame and turned to my computer. They thought the will was about money, but Grandpa's real inheritance was teaching me that sometimes protecting what matters means losing what you thought you couldn't live without. I thought I'd lost my family. Instead, I found out who they really were, and who I needed to become. The nameplate on my desk read, Rachel Morrison, CEO and President, Morrison Industries. I smiled and got back to work. Grandpa would expect nothing less. Thanks for listening to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice served cold.